Have you noticed that some people earn more, yet feel more trapped every year? Because the trap doesn't start when you lose money. It starts the moment someone smiles across a desk and says, "Congratulations, you're approved." Approved for what? A number, a limit, a luxury leash with interest. It's always the same movie, only the actors change. The newly promoted engineer, the doctor who finally made it, the young lawyer trying to look successful before becoming it, the technician surviving on overtime. The script never changes. The bank shows them the biggest house they can handle. The car dealer hypnotizes them with a low monthly payment. An app turns spending into something you barely feel, and social media whispers the same lie every day. You're falling behind. Nobody steals from you in the obvious way. They do something far more effective. They sell you comfort on a schedule. And the moment you accept, freedom turns into obligations, into bills, into "I can't quit right now," into panic disguised as stability. Here's the part most people don't want to hear. This isn't accidental. It's designed. An entire ecosystem profits when you confuse consumption with success. When every raise becomes a lifestyle upgrade. When future freedom is traded for present applause. Most people aren't broke because they don't earn enough. They're broke because they spend like they've already won and pay like they'll live forever. Ask yourself this, honestly. If no one could see what you own, would you still feel wealthy? Because maybe you didn't buy a house, you bought a fixed position. You didn't buy a car, you bought years of commitment. You didn't buy comfort, you bought silence. The silence of someone who can't afford to make mistakes. And in a moment, I'm going to name the exact traps that turn smart, hardworking people into financial prisoners, and the quiet difference between those who accumulate options and those who accumulate payments. Most people aren't broke because they don't make enough. They're broke because they spend like they've already won. Call it a paradox. Income rises, freedom declines. If you want to understand why, call it what it is. Money traps, designed to keep the middle class broke. I've watched this movie for longer than I'd like to admit. The players change. A young engineer, a surgeon in a new neighborhood, an eager lawyer fresh out of school, a technician with steady overtime. The script stays the same. A bank hands them a number, the maximum house they qualify for. A dealer offers a payment plan on a shiny new car. A slick app makes small monthly purchases feel invisible. Social media shows nothing but the highlight reels. Nobody sitting at the bank counter is interested in whether you build real wealth. They're interested in whether you pay. And once you start paying, freedom turns into a schedule. Let me make this blunt. These traps are not accidents. They are designed.
Banks, credit card companies, mortgage brokers, car lenders, marketing departments, they all profit when you treat consumption as a lifestyle rather than a choice. The economy hums when people pay interest, fees, and stretch their lives into the future to buy now. That humming is very profitable for the institutions that build the treadmill. For the individual, it is the sound of possibility being taxed away. Here is the central difference too many people miss. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what you keep and how you use it. You can earn a lot and still be as unfree as a person living paycheck to paycheck. The wealthy I respect often make less noise. They buy fewer things for show. They trade the craving for comfort today for the quiet luxury of options tomorrow. That silence, not the car in the driveway, is what buys security. So let's name the main traps right away. Give them labels. When you can name what you're up against, you can stop pretending it's fate. First, debt dressed as opportunity. Everyone is sold the idea that debt is neutral. Debt is not a moral failing, it is a tool. Tools can build houses or maim fingers. The wealthy use debt the way surgeons use scalpels, carefully, for advantage. The middle class, by contrast, uses debt for motion, to signal status, to buy convenience, to postpone painful choices. Credit cards, long car loans, and mortgages stretched to the limit convert future cash flows into present claims. Interest is not small. It is a claim on every pay raise you get after the purchase. Second, the thermostat of comfort, lifestyle inflation. You get a raise, and the thermostat kicks up. The nicer apartment, the upgraded car, the dining out, the gym subscription. The immediate reward feels exactly like progress. It is not. It is a habit. A rising thermostat is the stealth tax on your future. Third, status seeking and social comparison. The human brain is wired to compare. That served us well as a species when resources were scarce and social cohesion mattered. Today, it's a marketing department's best friend. When your neighbors, colleagues, and feeds display their best moments, you are programmed to chase parity.
The cost of keeping up is real, recurring, and invisible until it's too late. Fourth, illusion of ownership and illiquidity traps. People equate owning the biggest house they can finance with security, but a house is not a liquid asset. It eats maintenance, taxes, time, and choice. The biggest house you can afford may be the most expensive thing you will ever own in terms of opportunity cost. If all your wealth lives in a roof over your head that you cannot quickly convert to options when times change, you are wealthy in place, not free. Fifth, chosen ignorance, not learning about money. There's a quiet comfort in outsourcing financial decisions to others, in trusting that the experts have your back. The market of financial advice is vibrant because most of it benefits the advisor.
Ignorance exacts an invisible toll. It is a tax with compound interest. That list is not exhaustive, but it captures the machinery, incentives engineered by institutions, cognitive habits engineered by evolution, social frameworks engineered by culture and technology, all of it arranging the middle class into a situation where increased income is consumed by increased monthly obligations. Now you may be thinking, that's an interesting theory, but where's the proof? I won't drown you in numbers. I won't give you false certainty. But look at the repeated scenes across history. Speculative euphoria leading to leverage, leverage leading to sudden reversals. Think of the 1929 mania and the aftermath. Think of the housing excess and the crash around 2008. These weren't random flukes. They were episodes where borrowed money amplified human optimism and made temporary lifestyles seem permanent. The pattern is simple. Easy credit plus social validation equals a lot of people overextended at the same time. Here's how the mechanism works in everyday life. Compounding is the most powerful force for building wealth, but it's also fragile. Compounding needs three things: time, uninterrupted growth, and not taking out what you put in. When you borrow at high interest to finance lifestyle, you erode the very cash flows that would allow compounding to work. Interest payments are the enemy of compounding because they are cash that cannot be invested for future growth. Worse, unexpected expenses, layoffs, and rate increases force you to sell, not when it's convenient, but when you cannot avoid it. That interrupting of compound growth is what converts potential wealth into a sequence of payments. Picture compounding as a slow, steady river. Debt is a series of siphons that divert water away. Each siphon might seem small: a car payment here, a subscription there, a loan for a kitchen renovation now. A loan you barely notice. Together they redline the river until the stream that can grow becomes a trickle. Repeat this for a decade and you will be surprised how little remains. Liquidity matters as well. A house that is your largest asset is not helpful if it ties you to one area and consumes a chunk of your monthly cash for upkeep. Jobs change. Careers pivot. The illiquidity of visible assets is the silent trap. Wealth that sits in projects you can't easily convert to cash, especially if that wealth requires ongoing payments to sustain, is wealth with a leash on it. Let me be explicit. The institutions involved are not villains in the theatrical sense. They exist to make profits. A bank that lends money at interest is doing what banks do. Mortgage brokers are facilitating transactions. Dealers sell cars. Ad agencies sell dreams. But together, they create an ecosystem that rewards you paying over time, and that payment schedule is where the system extracts value. You might wonder, isn't buying a home and building equity a sensible move? Of course it can be. Owning a place can be a foundation for family life, a forced savings mechanism, and in some contexts, a hedge against rising rents. The trap is not the house itself. The trap is treating the mortgage as a measure of success rather than a liability that must be managed. If your mortgage stretches you so thin that you can't weather a downturn or seize an opportunity, it stops being an asset and becomes a shackle. Buy optionality, not appearances. The psychology is brutal in its simplicity. Human beings are wired for immediate reward. Delayed gratification requires discipline, and discipline is painful. Comfort is an addictive thing. Once you taste it, you seek it more. I call it the thermostat problem because people adjust their comfort level upward with every income change until the thermostat reaches a setting that feels normal, and then they act surprised when raises don't translate into net freedom. Social media has intensified this thermostat. Before, you compared yourself to a neighbor and a few peers. Now you compare yourself to a curated world of aspirational lives. Every scroll sells you the idea that lifestyle equals value. The algorithm amplifies this. It's not malevolence, it's business. The platform that keeps you engaged makes money from the same behaviors that drain your bank account. So what do? I'm not going to list 10 steps and pretend everyone is a magic bullet, but there are simple heuristics, rules of thumb, that will blunt these traps. Call them rules of thumb because life is messy and rigid prescriptions break. but these have survived test of time. Rule 1. Spend less than you earn. This is not profound until you make it practical. Keep your spending at a level that gives you room to save and invest, not because it's ascetic, but because it buys freedom. Freedom buys options. Options let you do things the money spent on a bigger house or a newer car cannot buy. Take a career risk, fund a move, wait out a downturn. Rule 2. Invest the difference. What you avoid spending, put to work. Let compounding do its quiet work. Small, consistent investments over long periods matter far more than occasional big gambles. Rule 3. Avoid interrupting compounding. Don't use short-term credit or loans in ways that force you to liquidate investments at inconvenient times. Emergencies happen. Build reserves so you don't have to sell the assets you're trying to grow. Rule 4. Buy optionality, not status. Choose assets that preserve mobility and optionality. Liquidity is a form of power. A modest lifestyle that leaves you cash flexible will generate opportunities the showy lifestyle cannot. Rule 5. Treat debt as a test. Most consumer debt should be failed, meaning you should avoid it. When considering a loan, ask, will this payment limit my choices in a crisis? Will this payment force me to prioritize appearance over options? If the answer is yes, walk away. Rule 6. Learn the basics.
Financial literacy is a low-cost, high-return investment. You don't need to become a professional, but you do need to understand that money grows over time, that interest can be both a friend and an enemy, and that fees and taxes are stealthy drains. Those are the heuristics, simple, blunt, and effective. They are not spectacular. They are boring. Boring is underrated. Now, a couple of immediate diagnostic questions you can answer in under a minute. Ask yourself these honestly. No one is grading you. These are test items, not shame traps. First, would I feel wealthy if nobody could see my possessions? Imagine all visibility removed. No social feed, no neighbor's dinner, no office parking spot. Would you feel wealthy? If the answer is no, a lot of your spending is status-driven. If the answer is yes, your wealth is internal, not performative. Second, does my latest raise get absorbed by lifestyle upgrades, or does it increase my net freedom? If every raise disappears into a new payment, you have a thermostat problem. Your financial life is on autopilot toward comfort, not freedom. If you answered those and felt a pang, good. Not pang is a useful signal. But don't let it morph into paralysis. The right response is a plan and small actions. A few micro actions you can start with today. Pause the next non-essential purchase for 30 days. When you feel the itch, write it down and check back in after the cooling period. Often the urge passes. Second, calculate 1 month's discretionary spending, the part you could live without for a year without changing your life much. If you can't do that quickly, start tracking. Awareness is the first leverage point. Third, commit to a tiny automatic savings transfer the day your paycheck arrives, even a small percent. If you never see it, you never miss it. A soft invitation here. If this is speaking to you, download the one-page compounding checklist I've put together. It isn't a silver bullet. It's a practical reminder of how compounding works and what interrupts it. Use it for 90 days and see what habits shift. Let me tell you about a real, typical case, not to shame anyone, but to illustrate how these traps form. Consider Mark, a diligent engineer in his early 30s. He got promoted. He qualified for a mortgage on a house with a number that made his heart race. It was within budget, the bank said. He bought it. He upgraded to a better car because it matched the neighborhood. He convinced himself the improvements were investments. Then came maintenance surprises, rising property taxes, and the mortgage had short-term balloon adjustments he hadn't anticipated. He refinanced to get breathing room, added new renovation debt to increase value, and when the company restructured 6 years later, a layoff made the monthly payments heavier than before. Mark had worn himself into a pattern where his life ran on borrowed time. You may know a Mark. Maybe you are Mark.
The trap was not a single bad decision. It was many plausible decisions, each justified with rationalization. I deserve this. I'll get another raise. I can always refinance. That is how the system turns freedom into rent. Contrast that with another image. An old friend I knew who lived modestly and quietly saved for decades. When a downturn came, he had options. He bought a small business at a discount with cash. He didn't have to sell investments. He didn't smooth his lifestyle with credit. He had liquidity and bought opportunity. You can admire the fancy car in a neighbor's driveway, or you can admire that quiet person who owns choices. Which would you prefer? People ask, isn't this just austerity? Can't I have both comfort and freedom? The point isn't to live like a monk, it's to live intentionally. Comfort for its own sake is a form of narrowness. Freedom is broader. It allows you to do unexpected things. It allows you to be generous without panicking. It allows you to sleep when markets are volatile. To choose both comfort and freedom is possible, but you buy them in sequence, not at the same time. First, by optionality. Then, when the safety is established, allow comfort to expand thoughtfully. Now think about the incentives again. Creditors make more when you borrow more. Car companies make more when you trade every few years. Real estate lobbies do well when turnover and expansion are high. Subscription businesses make reliable revenue from set-and-forget auto payments. Each of these profit engines aligns with a strategy that converts future cash into current consumption. You're not a mark for participating. You're a rational person in a system optimized to extract payments. But once you can step outside the system's default, you can arrange your life differently. Another practical test. List your 3 largest recurring monthly payments. Are they keeping you flexible or pitting you down? Are they on things that appreciate in value or on consumption that depreciates? Can you imagine having one of those payments without a catastrophic loss to your quality of life? If not, investigate. If yes, consider where that recovered cash could go. Let me be clear on housing. I'm not saying never buy. I'm saying be careful. The house that matches your lifestyle and leaves you with breathing room is different from the one that matches your neighbor's ego. Put another way, buy a house because you plan to live there and because the monthly cost fits an economy that tolerates downturns, not because a lender approved you for a number that makes a sales agent smile. Now let's examine a trap that is sneakier and more modern: invisible recurring costs. The subscription economy is genius at making spending painless. Pay a small monthly fee, and suddenly you have access to thousands of conveniences.
Multiply that across subscriptions, add in financing for furniture, electronics, streaming packages, cloud services, and you have a steady leak that goes unnoticed. The psychological trick is that micropayments feel cheaper. They add up. They siphon growth. Reclaim them. The story of the middle class being kept poor is less about scarcity and more about default choices. When the default is a big mortgage, a financed car, auto-pay subscriptions, and immediate lifestyle inflation, you must consciously choose a different default to escape the trap. Defaults dominate because they remove the need for discipline. If your default is buying the maximum the bank offers, you will likely end up tightly committed. If your default is saving first and spending what remains, you'll end up with more optionality. There's another class of trap, the narrative trap. People often tell themselves a story to justify their choices. I can't save now, I'm building my career. I have to look the part to get promoted. I deserve this. Stories are a human mechanism for aligning action with identity. The useful counterpunch is to ask, what identity do you really want? Identity as someone who keeps up appearances is different from identity as someone who controls their life. Pick the story that buys you options. The discipline story wins over the long run. Now, a quick word on advice. The middle-class money advice market is crowded. Everyone sells a package: credit repair, mortgage accelerators, investment platforms, lifestyle coaches. Many of them are useful. Many are not. The rule of thumb is simple. If an advisor's incentive aligns more with their fee than your outcome, be skeptical. Look for advice that reduces your monthly obligations and increases your flexibility. Fees that simply shuffle liabilities around without reducing total drag are not solutions. They are cosmetic fixes. Let's return to compounding with a metaphor you can keep. Think of compounding as planting an orchard. You plant trees and they take years to bear fruit. If every year you cut down some trees to make a quick buck or to fund a better house, you will never have an orchard. You may have a lovely-looking estate with young trees cut down and replanted, but you will never sit under the shade of mature trees. That's what lifestyle consumption does. You keep cutting immature growth to feed appearance. You will hear a lot of glamorous stories about people playing the system or hitting it big quickly. They are the exceptions, not the rule. The rule for sustained financial independence is simple boredom, consistent savings, low interruptions, avoidance of bad debt, and choosing options over appearances. It is not sexy, which is why it is underrated in a media environment that sells radical change rather than slow accumulation.
Now, before we go deeper into tactics, answer one more test honestly. If an economic shock forced you to reduce your spending by 30% tomorrow, could you do it without losing basic stability? If the answer is no, your life is fragile. Fragility means you have less room to choose. Less room to choose means the system can extract more. That is a design feature, not a bug. Here is where the story splits. You can either notice the design and start to rewire your life, or you can keep following defaults and expect different results. The middle-class money traps are designed to be invisible. They rely on plausible rationalizations. The lender approved it. It's affordable on paper. Everyone else is doing it. Turning away from those defaults requires three things: awareness, discipline, and a small set of rules you actually follow. I'll return to practical rules and a step-by-step set of habits you can adopt, but first, I want to tell you one short story that encapsulates the tension. Not to finish it, just to press the point. There was a woman I once met. Call her Anna. She was a nurse, steady work, suddenly offered a promotion that added a good chunk to her paycheck. The promotion also meant a new neighborhood, younger colleagues who drove newer cars, and a spouse who thought moving up was the logical next step. They bought a larger house. They added a second car payment. They filled the house with smart devices and conveniences because they were tired. For a while, everything looked better. Then the promotion stalled. New demands came home with longer hours and more stress. A medical emergency rattled their budget. The couple found themselves having to cobble together payments and refinance a line of credit to handle an unexpected bill. The new house, once a symbol of success, became a pressure point. I stopped there because Anna's story branches. In one branch, she keeps paying and becomes trapped. In the other, she renegotiates lifestyle and reclaims freedom. Both paths are plausible. The difference? A few months of different choices made early. That is both discouraging and hopeful. Discouraging because a few months can compound into years of obligation. Hopeful because a few months can also compound into options. There is a line I say too often: comfort is the real poverty. It sounds harsh, but what I mean is this: a life optimized for maximum immediate comfort at the cost of future choice is impoverished. It lacks the currency of optionality. Comfort becomes a currency you spend until you can't afford surprises. The alternative is a life that tolerates a little discomfort now to secure a lot of freedom later. We're at the point where you know the trap's outlines, you've seen the mechanisms, and you have a handful of concrete checks you can perform. The next sections will get practical.
I'll show specific ways the mortgage industry nudges people into the wrong house, how car financing turns depreciation into a lifestyle anchor, and how to construct a buffer that prevents compounding interruptions. I'll walk through a budgeting approach that is not about micromanagement, but about preserving optionality. I'll give you scripts to use when lenders and sellers offer the seemingly attractive deal. Before that, one final idea to hold. The central enemy of wealth for the middle class is not poverty. It is the illusion of wealth. The false signs, a finished basement, weekend vacations, a particular neighborhood, are confusing. They look like success. They are often just well-marketed expenses. If you want different results, you must resist the storytelling that persuades you to trade future options for present applause. Start small and be stubborn. The system will not make it easy. It was designed to do something else. Now, take a breath. Think about your thermostat. Think about the next discretionary item you are tempted to buy. Think about the 3 largest recurring payments you can name. We'll get into how to change defaults without becoming miserable, how to talk about money with partners without drama, and how to build a reserve that makes compounding invulnerable to life's interruptions. But first, choose one tiny step. Delay that next non-essential purchase for 30 days. If you want, get the compounding checklist. If this message is landing, that 30-day pause will feel like the smallest, most important act of rebellion against a system built to make you comfortable at the expense of your future choices. Remember the title: Money Traps Designed to Keep the Middle Class Broke. They are designed. They are visible once you look. And designing your way out is less about starry gambits and more about steady, stubborn choices. Now, let's get tactical. Knowing the traps is one thing. Rewiring your life so those traps don't catch you is another. The way you do that is by changing defaults, building a buffer, and learning a few conversational scripts that let you walk away when the offer is a trap designed as an opportunity. Start with mortgages, because that's where many people get married to payments for decades. The industry has a simple playbook: show you a qualification number and then sell you the lifestyle that number unlocks. That qualification is not your destiny. It's a lender's risk tolerance translated into a figure. The fact that you can borrow a particular amount does not mean you should borrow it. Too many people mistake approval for prudence. Here are the mechanics that create the trap. Lenders often structure loans so that early payments are mostly interest. That means the first years of your mortgage give you little principal reduction while locking you into a monthly commitment.
When you add in maintenance, property taxes, insurance, and occasional surprises. A broken furnace, a roof repair. The monthly cost can look very different from the payment the broker showed on the pamphlet. If your cash flows are tight, a job change, a medical bill, or even a local market shock can force you to sell or refinance at exactly the worst moment. That is how a house becomes a shackle. The practical response is simple enough, though it runs against many social instincts. Buy a home you can afford without strain. Buy one that gives you breathing room. Think in terms of monthly cash flow, not purchase price alone. If the monthly hook takes away your ability to save and to react, it's too big. There are times to stretch, when a new market opens, when you can see a long-term plan that benefits. But most of the time, prudence beats prestige. The house that makes your friends nod is not the same as the house that preserves optionality. Refinancing is another seductive instrument. It is marketed as saving money or freeing up cash, but it can be a synthetic way to keep people paying for longer. Every time you refinance to lower a payment, you extend the schedule. That can feel good in the short term, but it often reduces the pressure to solve the underlying issue. Too many obligations and too little savings. Refinancing, like any tool, can be useful, but it is also a way to postpone a hard decision. The hard decision is the one that changes your trajectory. Say no to an upgrade. Accept less immediate comfort to buy time and options. Cars are similar but faster. New car shine and a low monthly payment hide two ugly facts. Cars depreciate, and the loan may outlive the useful life you expected. Stretching a car loan to 6, 7, or 8 years makes the monthly easy, but creates negative equity and dependency. Trade-in cycles are built to keep you on the treadmill. Better payments, new features, the latest safety bells, and the dealer knows you'll trade every few years because you like that feeling. A car is transportation. A car loan should not be a status signal. Buy what meets your needs. Buy what you can own without sinking your monthly flexibility. And remember that depreciation often outpaces the perceived social value. Leases and long-term warranties are another modern snare. They promise convenience. They deliver ongoing payments and a natty illusion of lower responsibility. Meanwhile, subscription services, the software, the streaming, cloud storage, membership gyms, and curated boxes are the slow leaks that collectively add up. Each micropayment is small, so psychology says no harm. But together they create a continuous drain on the river of cash that could have been planted as trees producing fruit later. Audit the leaks. You'd be surprised how many months' work vanish into services you no longer use. Now, let's talk about the most important buffer, cash reserves. You need more liquidity than you think.
I won't fetishize a particular number because life circumstances vary, but I will insist on a principle. Build enough liquid reserve so that you don't have to sell investments or take on high-interest debt when trouble arrives. That reserve is not glamorous. It sits quietly, boring and unspectacular. But when markets convulse or an emergency hits, it's the difference between selling at a loss and holding steady. How do you build it? Two habits matter more than anything else: automatic savings and ruthless prioritization of the first dollars that arrive. Set up an automatic transfer the moment your paycheck hits the account. Call it whatever you want: savings, capital, future options, but remove it before the temptation to spend arises. Pay yourself first. If you wait until the end of the month, you will rationalize the redirected funds away. Automation turns virtue into default. The second habit is to make stop decisions routine. Pause upgrades, delay non-essential purchases, and test the urge to buy. The 30-day rule is useful because it interrupts the impulsive wiring that marketers count on. When you give yourself a cooling-off period, you often discover that what felt urgent was merely a well-engineered want. Use the pause to imagine the alternative, that money folded into an investment, into a buffer, or into an opportunity fund that lets you walk into advantage when others are forced to sell. Budgets need to be practical, not punitive. The goal is to maximize your savings rate, not to become miserable. Track what matters: recurring commitments, discretionary leaks, and one-time hits. Start with your largest drains: housing, transportation, and debt payments, because that's where small percentage changes yield big freedom. Then target the subscriptions and conveniences that add little to real satisfaction. A smaller set of intentional expenses yields more control than a larger set of auto payments that run your life. Now, words to use when the salesperson or banker presents the seductive deal. You do not have to be rude. You have to be uncompromising with your plan. Try something like this. Thanks, I appreciate that offer. I only consider purchases that leave a comfortable margin for savings and unexpected events. If this payment doesn't do that, it's not for me. Or when a dealer flashes a monthly number, show me the total cost and the timeline, because I only buy things I can afford to keep in cash terms, not just on paper. These templates signal that you're not a typical impulse buyer and that walking away is an option for you. Walking away is the main power most shoppers forget they have. When negotiating with lenders about mortgages, use similar directness. I want a payment I can sustain if my income drops. I will not add payments that remove flexibility. If the lender insists you should maximize borrowing because the market is hot, smile and say, that's your business model. My business model is optionality. The words matter because they reframe the interaction from a transaction to a strategy conversation. You're not buying a lifestyle, you're buying options. If you live with a partner, these conversations often become the hardest part. You are negotiating not only money, but identity and values. The trick is to separate facts from feelings. Start by asking 2 planning questions. What are our long-term priorities? And what kind of emergencies would we want to be ready for? Then, map how each major purchase affects those priorities. Use we language. If we buy X, how does that affect our ability to do Y? Avoid blame, avoid moral judgments. Make the decision about options. Can we live comfortably if income drops? If not, let's scale back. Some people balk at this and say it sounds like stoicism rather than enjoyment. It's not a denial of comfort. It is a way to purchase comfort deliberately and at the right time. Think of it as sequencing. First buy optionality, then buy comfort. When you do that, comfort doesn't feel precarious. It becomes a dividend of a plan, not a gamble. Partners often become allies when they see the stability optionality creates. Present the alternatives in clear contrast. A slightly smaller house now that means security versus a bigger house now that means risk. Framing choices in terms of future options reduces fights and increases clarity. Let me speak about investment interruptions because this is where good intentions die. People often say they will invest once they have time or once things settle. Things seldom settle. Life is a sequence of disruptions. The best way to prevent interruptions is to make your savings automatic, to build reserves so that emergencies are met without selling investments, and to keep the investments boring. You do not need constant tinkering. You need consistency. The compounding river flows best when you don't dig it up every season to check for pebbles. Fees and advisors deserve a note too. An advisor who gets paid more when you trade more poses a conflict. Look for incentives that align with your outcome. Fewer transactions, lower fees, longer-term advice. Question advice that pressures immediate action or frames debt shuffling as a cure. Honesty matters more than hype. If someone promises to fix your cash flow by adding complexity without reducing total monthly drag, be skeptical. The right advice often says less and costs little. Now, 3 micro habits that will cement these principles into daily life. First, set a simple weekly review. 5 minutes. List the 3 largest cash outflows for the next month. If one of them is discretionary, ask whether you can pause it. If you make this review a habit, you'll catch leaks early. Second, create a purchase ledger for non-essential items. Before buying anything over a modest threshold, write it down. Why you want it, how it changes your monthly commitments, and what you will defer instead. Revisit the ledger in 30 days.
Third, automate a portion of every windfall. Bonuses, tax refunds, gifts. Split it. Some into a learning fund, some into an opportunity fund, some into paying down a liability. Windfalls are when you can either ratchet up the thermostat or amplify your options. Choose the latter. You will face cultural pressure. Friends will project their choices onto you. Social media will show curated success that tempts you to match. So adopt a public strategy. Reduce the visibility of your consumption. When possible, avoid broadcasting purchases intended to impress. That doesn't mean hiding your life. It means making your financial strategy private so it cannot be hijacked by comparison. If you must share, celebrate milestones of optionality. We built a reserve this month. Sounds nerdy, but it's powerful. It changes the stories you tell and the stories you accept. Let me offer a short-listed actionable rules you can memorize and use as mental law. They are intentionally few because rules you remember are the ones you follow. 1. Live below your means. The gap between income and lifestyle is your most powerful asset. 2. Automate savings and investments before discretionary spending.
3. Treat long-term debt as a liability that must be justified, not a badge of success. 4. Prioritize liquidity until your core assets are safely compounding. 5. Make purchases after a cooling period. If desire persists, reevaluate. 6. Use fees and interest as your compass. If a fee or interest payment increases without improving optionality, reconsider. 7. Ask the 2 questions often. Would I feel wealthy if no one could see my stuff? Does this increase my freedom or reduce it? These are heuristics, not ironclad laws. Use them as filters. When an offer comes along, pass it through these 7 sieves. If it fails, let it go. Now, because language matters, here are a few lines you can speak when guilt and social pressure urge you to spend. I'm investing in future freedom. Or, right now, my job is to create optionality. I'm opting out of consumption noise. Short, declarative statements anchor behavior. They help you resist not because they are convincing to others, but because they align your present actions with your long-term identity. Remember the orchard metaphor. Plant trees and leave them be. Resist the seductive idea that wealth is about transactions. Wealth is about leaves that grow while you sleep, options that appear when markets or careers shift, and a calmness that comes from being able to act rather than react. The most enviable people I've known didn't buy the biggest house or the fanciest car. They bought time and discretionary ability. They paid less in the currency of panic. There will be setbacks. You will occasionally find that a surprise expense drains part of your buffer, or you'll make a purchase you later regret. That's part of life. The difference between someone who ends up trapped and someone who walks free is how they respond.
Recover fast, rebuild reserves, cut discretionary spending temporarily, learn the lesson and hardwire it into your process. The discipline is not perfection, it's resilience. Before I close, one more test you should keep near your steering wheel. Imagine 2 futures, one in which your net worth is tied up in visible assets that you cannot quickly convert, and another where you have modest visible assets but significant liquid optionality. Which future gives you freedom to change jobs, move cities, take entrepreneurial risks, care for family, or give generously without stress? If your answer favors the second future, then your current choices should shift toward that end. If the answer favors the first, then you are prioritizing appearances over agency, and the system will reward that by making sure the price of appearance is constant payments and less freedom. This whole argument comes back to one hard principle. Comfort purchased today at the cost of future options is a poor trade. Comfortable poverty is still poverty. The goal is not to be miserly, it's to be deliberate. Choose the thermostat setting that buys tomorrow's options, not the one that makes today's neighbors nod. Now act. Pick one small immediate behavior. Pause the next non-essential purchase for 30 days. Track what you would have spent and put that money into a labeled account instead. If during the pause you still want the item, make the purchase with full awareness of the cost, what you gave up in terms of saved options. If you don't want it, let that money work quietly in the background while your future self enjoys the dividends. This is the moment that defines many later years. A 30-day pause is not dramatic. It's a tiny rebellion against a system designed to keep you comfortable at the expense of freedom. Do the pause. Begin the weekly 5-minute review. Set up one automatic transfer today. Those 3 acts, repeated, bend the arc. Money traps designed to keep the middle class broke are not mystical. They are the product of incentives, psychology, and design. They're visible once you look. Escape is neither mystical nor miraculous. It is a matter of steady choices, of refusing default offers that swap future options for present applause, and of building a life where freedom is the currency you value most. Start small. Be stubborn. Make the next 30 days count.